Is your business in Australia supporting or exposed to potentially supporting money laundering by your clients, customers and everything else, or basically financing terrorism around the world?
What AML CTF is and why now it's becoming a regulatory burden.
There is a significant lack of education in the market about it. It's a big scary beast.
So what happens if we think we're compliant, but we aren't? Who will be responsible to? What's the repercussions?
If you're not delivering your annual compliance report, then you'll get a red flag. I actually am a strong proponent and supporter of cash. You've got a lot of uncles that work in the trades, mate, so I'm sure.
How much for cash?
This episode is powered by SEER Financial Group. Seriously good accountants, delivering outcomes that keep people in business. Visit seerfg.au today.
Good day, good evening, good morning, good wherever you are. Welcome back to It's All About the Grey podcast. I'm absolutely privileged and honoured to grab an hour of Craig's time. Hopefully he won't dribble on too much today, but we've got Craig Gregory, Managing Partner of SEER Integrity and Compliance and founder and managing director now of Overseer AML. Craig, thank you for lending us some of your time today. I know it's a busy time of year heading into Tranche 2, but welcome to the podcast and look forward to hearing a bit about you and a bit about Overseer.
Thanks, Paz. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to sit down and share the experience we've had with getting obviously SEER Integrity and Compliance and Overseer up and ready to go to market.
Yeah, it's an exciting time, mate, and it's been a journey for us. We've obviously been mates for a little bit of time before we got into business together. Yep. So, Craig, why don't you tell us a bit about your history and how you got into professional services? It's not necessarily a traditional pathway, but it's probably a story worth sharing. So, why don't we start with that?
Yeah, thanks, Paz. Look, it has been quite a journey, and to be honest with you, I still am a bit of a child. I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, and every day, I seek new opportunities to learn and develop myself. So back in the 90s, funnily enough, because I'm a little bit older than you, as you know, and you constantly remind me. Obviously, I went through undergrad at university, and I wanted to be Gordon Gekko, which is, if you know, probably the precursor for the Wolf of Wall Street, which was an older movie. Do you know the movie?
I know the Wolf of Wall Street.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely know the movie.
So it's called Wall Street. The other movie, yes.
Okay.
So Gordon Gekko was the high flyer in this movie back then. I thought, well, I need to go and study business and get rolling with it. But straight out of high school into university for me was, I didn't have contextual understanding of what the subject matter was. So I actually ended up doing a couple of years of business and then transferred over and did a degree in social science in policing. And then I joined the police force here in Western Australia, where I served for about 10 years in various roles around Western Australia. So obviously in Perth, in sunny Meekatharra as a uniformed police officer up there, and came back and spent a bit of time at a number of different squads when you become a detective, you do a probation period at different sections, and then finished up at Claremont Detectives, actually, when I left the job. During that time, I was also seconded across to the Australian Federal Police and then into East Timor with United Nations Civilian Police. And looked after Dili CIB, or the detective's office there for a period, which was great. And came back, and I just kind of felt that it was time to move on when I sat back here in Claremont Detectives. And I thought, wow, what's the next opportunity that can come before me? I looked at developmental opportunities for study. So I enrolled and did an MBA through University of New South Wales, so AGSM. Which was fantastic, and then started looking at other opportunities for my professional growth. I went, funnily enough, and worked at the Workplace Ombudsman for about 6 weeks because I applied for 2 jobs at the same time, and picked up a role on the back of that with what was back then a federal government department called the Office of Transport Security, which did preventive security for terrorist attack on critical infrastructure. So, still in that public service role, and especially as a stepping stone to get out of the police, where I really valued not so much the financial aspect of my job, but more so the giving back and the personal reward you get out of doing the right thing for people. So that's what really still drives me today, to be fair. There's not a lot of opportunity in the federal government if you're based in Perth. The next step for me in that role was to move to Canberra, which obviously wasn't prepared to do. Came back and looked at other opportunities. My brother-in-law was a partner and still is a partner at one of the big 4 firms, and he basically introduced me to an opportunity there, and I ended up picking up a role with the Big Four. And basically, the minute my backside hit the seat, I was like, oh my God, what have I done? The harder I work, the richer someone else gets. There wasn't any personal reward for me. I'd lost the camaraderie and the right culture that really did drive me. So I looked at opportunities to get out of there. Through my study, I actually picked up an opportunity at HBF, and I went into their HBF health insurance, and then ran the fraud team there for about 5 years, I think it was. And during that time, I actually was approached by a number of different airports and maritime ports to undertake their regulatory audits under the legislation associated with what I was doing in counter-terrorism there with OTS. So, and I still actually do that work today for a number of different facilities around Australia. And it's a very niche area of the market. There's no one else exists, but it's not a high-paying, role. The expense associated with those audits, it's a must-have. It's a bit like paying for insurance. You have to have it, but you don't want to spend the money on it, right? So continued doing that. HBF were great in sponsoring me to do that. EY then asked, this is the Big Four firm, asked me to come back and actually work with them again. And the minute I walked through the door, I knew it was a mistake. Funnily enough, literally this minute I walked through the door, Medibank then rang me and asked me to do some work with them. So I actually moved to Melbourne for a period of time as a senior exec over there with the Medibank team, and ran a team of 60 staff, basically looking at fraud, waste and abuse of financial payments associated with health insurance claims. So we were pulling in about $120 million a year in financial loss back to Medibank, which is great because that actually makes the products more affordable. So and there is an element of fraud, but a lot of it was just miscoding, probably over delivery of services and the like, and we got that money back. My father was very ill while I was over there, so I actually asked Medibank for a redundancy package so I could move back to Perth and look after Dad before he passed away, and he has since passed away. And they said, we don't do voluntary redundancy. I'm like, oh, come on. We had a few challenges in other parts of the business, and I was actually finishing a big contract engagement with a federal government department to do their payment integrity services. And what happened there was finalising that contract, Medibank did the right thing and even paid for my move back to Perth. So I've had a really good experience with Medibank. They were a great crew to be with, and came back to Perth and spent a bit of time with Dad before he passed away, which was, you can't put a price on that, and was, again, really, I held great value in the opportunity to move back to Perth to do that. From there, I had to find a job in Perth, so I worked in it's an insurance services company for a while, so looking, again, fraud and abuse in terms of insurance payments, and then went into another consulting firm looking to really drive some opportunity and success there. I picked up a couple of roles as well. So I'm on the board of Innovate Australia, National Treasurer for the Australian Crime Prevention Council as well, and really trying to hone in on the market. And one of the key things I did, and this actually happened when I was working for government some years ago, I went to a course with the Australian New Zealand School of Government, ANSOG, and they had a gentleman who was presenting. His name's Professor Malcolm Sparrow, and he's from the Kennedy School of Government there in the US, and he's also originally a policeman from Ireland from memory. And he's got a book, if you ever get the chance to read, it's called The Regulatory Craft, and his message in it, and it's always hung with me, and I think it's a real, a good catch cry. And it's a mantra that I use for the way I approach the work that I do. And that is find small problems, fix them, and tell people about it. And that is the true secret that I believe is the secret to success. And I do that very much on a day-to-day basis. And so obviously moving on from that other firm, I've come into SEER and worked with you, Paz, and really driving a business that I think has been a real, bringing together of all of the services and qualities and tools that I've picked up over that journey, and really delivering that to market, which has been, to be honest with you, it's actually been a real passion for me to do that. And I bounce out of bed every day. I love doing what I do. And the true value I see, again, is delivering positive outcomes to clients. The financial reward, again, that comes with doing the right thing, I find. And of course, with Overseer, Overseer AML, again, I was looking at the market and I thought, well, where's the real problem here, and how can we fix it, and how can we tell people about it? So, looking at Overseer, I went, well, hey, there's this whole new tranche of regulatory requirements that are being pushed onto industry, and in particular accounting firms, law firms, conveyancers, precious metal dealers, you name it. And there is a significant lack of education in the market about it. It's a big, scary beast. The regulator's not really holding anyone's hand, although I did note that AUSTRAC did bring some starter kits out online a couple of days ago. Even them, I found, weren't really that clear. They help, but it doesn't map, especially for the smaller firms who just don't have time to manage this additionally regulatory oversight, regulatory burden. And what I found was that there's a real risk for people to A, not be compliant, or B, be over compliant, which is onerous on them, and the costs associated with it, they have to pass on to the client. So at the end of the day, the consumer pays for all these additional regulatory burdens that they have to manage. So I looked at that and thought, well, some of the competitor firms were going out, and this is what I was hearing from market, and saying, well, you need a risk assessment, we'll do your risk assessment, we'll write your program for you. It's going to cost you $20,000 or $30,000 or $50,000 for that. And I thought, that's ridiculous. Realistically, most companies should be able to do this by themselves or with some light touch support, because they are going to need to learn how to do at least part of it over a period of time, because otherwise they're going to continue to have to pay $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 to third-party companies to continually manage that for them. So I thought, well, where's an opportunity to do more for them, to help them be self-sufficient, keep the cost down and drive an efficient process. So that's how we got to that and found that niche in the market. So there you go.
There you go. It's as I said, it's an amazing story, Craig, and you've obviously seen a few things before you got into the professional services space. Craig, just taking a few steps back, why don't you, I guess, explain to the audience and potentially even the uneducated audience as to what AML CTF is and why now it's becoming a regulatory burden.
Yeah, so AML is anti-money laundering, and CTF is counter-terrorism financing. And so when you look at this from a risk perspective, you're looking at money laundering. So is your business in Australia supporting or exposed to potentially supporting money laundering by your clients, customers, and everything else, or basically financing terrorism around the world? So it's about understanding your level of risk and exposure to it. So the reason the change in legislation, so what happened in Australia, we were probably a little bit behind the rest of the world in terms of which entities, which business areas, which industries were covered by our AML legislation compared to other parts of the world. So this, what's called Tranche 2, is a capture of all these additional industries in Australia to bring them up to speed and align Australia's AML requirements basically with the rest of the world. So what happens there is, as I said, they are now having to do a risk assessment to understand their level of exposure and risk based on their service line and customer base and a number of other components, such as which jurisdictions do you do work in? Do you only service customers in Australia versus globally? And then, of course, writing a plan to demonstrate how you're going to mitigate that risk, and then ongoing compliance around that.
So obviously, as a professional advisor, we now have an obligation to go through and better understand our clients, or Craig, is it more the relationship that we have with their businesses?
Yeah, so at this stage, it's your relationship with your clients, and it doesn't just include the financial transactions, it's also the services that you're providing. So for example, if you've got a client from an accounting perspective or a legal perspective, and you're setting up 30 trust accounts for the same client over a short period of time, is that a regular behavior that you'd be doing for a single business? Probably not, right? So you'd probably say, well, you've got an obligation then to submit what's called an SMR, a suspicious matter report, through to AUSTRAC, and say, something's just a little bit off here. I've got an obligation to report this, so please have a look from your end. If you do submit an SMR, you're obligated by law, you're not actually allowed to tell the subject of the report that you've actually reported
them
as well. So just keep that in mind, because you commit an offence if you do that as well.
Yeah, it's a big burden, right? It's difficult enough, it's fair to say, in any business, but even for us as tax accountants, to have all these obligations we're required to adhere to, and now it's just yet another burden. So obviously the development of Overseer, Craig, which we can get to shortly, will probably hopefully assist in at least our listeners or potentially others with a solution. And that's the intention, to provide an efficient solution that's not overly complex. But before we get into that, I guess it's just important to clarify and understand, Craig, for businesses hearing Tranche 2 AML for the first time, what does that actually mean?
So it means they haven't had an obligation previously to meet the requirements of the AML and CTF Act, which is obviously Commonwealth legislation. And now, as of 31 March, you have to start, or the portal is now open for you to register with AUSTRAC as of 31 March. Mm-hmm. And then as of 1 July, you obviously have to meet your obligations in terms of your risk assessment, your program, your policies to demonstrate how you comply or operationalise your program. And then, of course, into what's called KYC, so know your customers. So basically, the onus on you as an accounting firm will be, you've got a new customer that's come on board, you have to source documentations to prove their identity, or the entity's information, such as your ASIC extract or ABN registration documentation, if it's a sole trader, including their motor driver's license, and then actually undertake a screening against the DFAT sanctions list, global country sanction lists, and PEP, so politically exposed persons. There's a whole range of checks you need to do, and then undertake a risk assessment against that entity before you make a determination if you're actually going to engage them to do work. So you're basically vetting your customers before you do any work with them. So that places a huge onus on all accountants, all law firms who are providing these services, because the first few months, to be honest with you, I'm sure customers will be like, "Why do you want that? Well, I've never had to give that to you before."
Of course. Yeah.
So it's quite a big change cycle that you have to go through. And then the other part on that is all those transactions that you have with that customer, you have to monitor on an ongoing basis. So one of the key things with Overseer is we've actually made it so you can integrate with your financial management systems, such as Xero, MyOb's coming. We haven't got them on the board yet, but Xero, QuickBooks, Reckon, and even Microsoft. We've got integrations so that you can, and a basic CSV file, so you can actually integrate all of that data. We've got a set of rules that we've developed, and those transactions are all assessed on an ongoing basis to help our clients meet their compliance requirements and obligations.
So Craig, again, for someone like myself and potentially the listeners, there's all these words and legislative requirements. It just feels so intimidating and overly complex. Is that what's happening right now? Is it just that this is just some big thing that we're expected to just be onboarded and integrate? It feels like yes, there's been some awareness, but there's just a complete lack of education. Is that the way that most people would be seeing this?
I think so. And one of the key things with legislation, ignorance of the law is no excuse, right? Mm-hmm. So it's incumbent on every lawyer who's providing a designated service, to understand what is a designated service under the legislation, and same with accountants and all the other different industries that are captured under Tranche 2. And look, there is let's say an element of grace period. There's a bit of a soft approach that AUSTRAC have taken in terms of introducing it, but they've been doing this for over a year. In terms of they've been pushing out messages to market, they've been doing a lot of stuff, so and engaging with the business community around this. They posted a lot of stuff on their website and LinkedIn. So have a look at the AUSTRAC website. The onus is on industry to educate themselves more so than anything else. And if you're not compliant down the track, well, the reality is, with the data reach that regulators have these days, they can see if there's transactions taking place and you're not reporting them and the like. So it's really, and not that that's necessarily going to happen overnight, but that is where this will get to over time.
So what happens if we think we're compliant, but we aren't? Where does the risk sit? Who will we be responding to? Who will be responsible to? What's the repercussions?
Yeah, so as part of your AML compliance program, you have to nominate a compliance officer who does have responsibility for the operationalisation of your program. One of the key things with that, it still has your key personnel who are also responsible under under the legislation, under the AML CTF Act. One of the key things there also is you, as part of your program, you have to do your annual reporting to AUSTRAC. So it should be coming up as part of your risk management function for your business. If you're not delivering your your annual compliance report, then you'll get a red flag from AUSTRAC. They'll tell you, don't you worry.
Right.
And then on top of that, under your plan, you actually have to have a regular review of it, depending on the size scale of your operation. Let's say every 2 years, you have to have a external review, independent review of your program. That should pick up where you may or may not be compliant or overly compliant. Okay, so and again, that's another cost to your business that you have to then factor in. So the risk to a lot of businesses isn't just the compliance side of things; it's also the fact that they're going to have a $50,000 bill or a $20,000 bill for all these outsourced compliance service providers, and they haven't factored into their pricing model moving forward. So it's a whole of business change that accountants and lawyers really need to be across, because if they're not across it, it's going to stand out like the proverbial that they're not compliant. But also, the change isn't in isolation. So that's the key thing here, is that every accounting firm, every law firm, most anyway. So again, it's not necessarily about the fact you're a law firm or an accounting firm. Providers of these designated services, they will all be changing as of 1 July. So it's not going to be in isolation, and you're probably the one that stands out for not doing it.
Yeah, it's just, again, Craig, it just seems overly complex. Us in SEER, we're obviously an affected business, right? Which has allowed us probably to identify where an opportunity could rest in the market, and ultimately where you presented an idea to the group around the establishment of overseer and how this is not only going to help us and other businesses. So the purpose of today is probably to spread that awareness as to what our obligations are and what solution that obviously you've been able to come up with. You're clearly very well educated in the space. It's not something that you've learnt overnight. It's something that you've had decades of experience in dealing with, particularly with your fraud and investigative work. So just explain again to all of us, what is overseer? Where was that gap in the market that led you to establishing it, and why overseer as opposed to us trying to do it ourselves?
Great question. And so I do take you back to Malcolm Sparrow, Professor Sparrow, and find small problems, fix it, and tell people
Not
about
Jack
it.
Sparrow, is it?
No, not Jack. He's Malcolm. He's a good fella. Look, one of the key things I saw is that in the market, so Tranche 1 has been around. So we call Tranche 1, they're the established entities such as your banking systems and financial services providers. They've been covered under the AML CTF Act for quite some time. And so what's happened with them is they have had systems that have been in place, but they're industrial systems. They're big systems. And so, for example, there's quite a lot of businesses or services out there, so online services that do KYC, the know your customer side of things. And there's a lot of ones out there that also do your transaction modeling, which is huge for the banking industry, right? They're data analytics driven, all that kind of stuff. And there's a couple that do both KYC and the transaction monitoring capabilities. What I found was there was no systems in the market that really supported your small to medium enterprises to get up and running, basically, to meet their compliance requirements in a affordable and meaningful manner. And so there was no systems when I looked at it, when we're looking at this, there was no systems in the market that had a risk-based risk engine in there to help, the customers, or sorry, the affected businesses, prepare and undertake their own risk assessment, produce a report on that. So it's like, well, how can we do that? Okay, well, so we built the risk engine. It automatically, from that risk assessment, it produces a report that's compliant with ISO 31000, which is great. So it meets all the risk management framework compliance requirements. Done. How can we then integrate that into a plan? So again, each customer has to approve their own plan. That's their liability risk that they've got to say, yes, that's our risk assessment, we approve it. We've then presented a templated plan that integrates the outcomes, the outputs of the risk assessment, and it basically goes, here's your program, here's your plan, review it, make any changes, and then you guys re-upload it to the system and approve it. And it has, as you upload your policies and your programs, it actually gives you a compliance score to help you understand your ongoing compliance and where you're sitting in terms of a scale from 0 to 100. From there, this is one of the key things that we have integrated, is you've also got your internal compliance requirements. So all of your key personnel and your employees who are providing these designated services have to have a police clearance certificate, and they actually have to get them, refreshed on a regular basis, depending on what you've got in your plan. So how do you then manage and monitor your police clearance certificate? So again, a lot of small to medium enterprises don't necessarily have a dedicated HR function that has certificate management and everything else. So we built that into the system and said, well, you've got your certificate, here we go, it's renewed, you have to renew it every 2 years. So the system now, it sends you an email a month before and says, Pasquale, you need to get your new certificate and upload it, and it's got reminders built in and everything else. And then on that, you've also got to train all your staff. So you've got an obligation to give them training and understanding of what is the AML and CTF Act, and what are the obligations of the business. So what are the designated services they provide? What are their obligations in terms of meeting the requirements of the Act and the program or the plan? And then, things also such as reporting SMRs and the like, and retention of data. So we built that. So we built a full learning management system into it as well. We'll do a bespoke, we do AI videos so that, again, it's not a huge cost, but we've got the tools, we've got the template set up, AI video, watch the video, sit the test. We retain the data for 7 years as well, and we can show that, A, your police clearance certificates are compliant, your staff are trained and their compliance is up to date, and we do the regular training on an ongoing basis every 12 months from memory. So they have to keep continuing doing that, and we keep records of that as well. And then move into the KYC. So we've integrated all of the required sanctions checks that you need to be doing. We've kept it simple. So what we've found with a lot of the competitors in the market, they charge you for the KYC check. So they'll give you a sample amount, or let's say 10, and then they'll charge you more. Ours are all included in the price. And the reason for that is we're not doing scan tech and some of these other services, so verifying that the driver's license is correct, because you actually don't need to do that. What you need to do is you've got to satisfy yourself. So what we've built into that is that there's an AI check that's built into the system that says, hang on a sec, you've uploaded a meme of whatever, and you purported it to be a driver's license. That's not, so it rejects automatically. So we do have some checks and balances in place, but we're not verifying these IDs against a particular database, because again, that's more than being compliant. It's over the top, and it's a cost that the business should not have to bear, because, as I said, these costs are going to be pushed onto their customers at the end of the day.
And in fairness, right, it probably is a good process that we are deploying, because it allows us to better understand who our clients are. Yep. And whether or not they align to our vision and our purpose and our values, and are they doing businesses that we want to be engaged with. More often than not, there's many opportunities out there to take on all sorts of different clients, but I think what it will do is it will drive an accountability piece across the whole industry, so that we can actually deal with people that are engaged in legitimate business, and hopefully in turn drive a better culture in the industry, rather than as you and I both know, some of that cowboy culture that she'll be right, shoot from the hip, and we'll work it out when we get to it. So, Craig, obviously, Overseer is a fantastic product. You've spent a significant amount of time developing it. I think the important question is, which you might have already addressed, but in probably better understanding, is if the regulator did knock tomorrow, and I didn't have a product like Overseer or my own solution, what am I up for?
Yeah, well, I guess if you didn't have a system and you didn't have a process in place, you're not going to be compliant, and there will be a transition period where the regulator will be a bit more understanding before coming in, a bit more lenient. But at the end of the day, and this is what we found, is if you want to try and do it yourself, it is a onerous, laborious task. I personally cannot see a business being able to meet their compliance requirements without having a system, be it ours or another one in the market. I think it's it is highly unlikely that you will be able to be compliant without a system. The cost associated with it would be a full-time employee without a system, and they would then have to develop some manual processes regardless. So, that's kind of where I look at and say, if you're going to pay 75, 80K a year for, let's say, an admin person to take responsibility for that, versus, our top end product is about $5,000 a year, just under, I think about $4,400 for a annual subscription. You go, why wouldn't you do it? Is what I'm trying to, and I pay for accounting service. I don't want to have to pay an extra $200 a year to cover someone's $75,000 wage that they're paying for someone to manage that process. I'd rather pay an extra $10 a year or $5 a year, no worries at all. It's a lot more palatable. The other part of this is that even with this system, you're still going to have someone to drive it and manage it. And there still will be a cost of that as well. So yes, the system is automated to the point as much as it can be, but there still is a requirement for businesses to understand their customer, understand the information they provided, reject or accept it, and do the risk assessments. So what we've done with that, understanding that, so that's probably, so let's say it's $4,500 for the platform, and then you go, hey, there's, realistically for an FTE, we're still gonna have to have someone do part of that job, or we're gonna have to hire someone anyway. It does add up over time. So what we've done is also offered an outsource model for that as well, which is just $20,000 a year, which includes the price of the platform. So it's the idea of that is you go, well, someone manages that for me. I've still got a responsibility as the compliance officer. We call it a compliance manager in the system because we actually appreciate the value that and the risk people are taking to do this job. But the legislation says it's a compliance officer. So a little anomaly in that, but that's intentional. And what we see is that we would basically onboard customers for our customers. If they're low risk, we've actually got a function so they can auto approve, so it doesn't actually have to go through that approval process. But managing that process it's not as simple as, hey, we've got the person at the front desk and they can just take on that responsibility because they have to know what they're doing. So that's why we've offered that as an outsource opportunity as well.
Incredible, Craig. It's a not necessarily that that we've been involved together in putting it to market, but I think it just goes to show that you've obviously spent a significant amount of time getting to this point, and it's going to become a big problem for SMEs if they don't get on board. And like you said, there is other alternates out there, and today is probably raising the awareness of what our obligations are, and where a solution could be provided, be it through yourself, an overseer, or potentially another provider. Where do you see, Craig, the AML compliance journey heading? Are we going to get to a point where we're down to the dollar by dollar transaction in a client's file, and we're having to ask them to validate it? Where is this all heading? Are we becoming an enforcer of AUSTRAC? Like, where is this all going to end?
Well, you already went for the ATO by, as you know, we all do, by collecting GST money, but
and tax money. Yep.
But look, I dare say there is a possibility that's where it will end up. I mean, so part of the obligation is, yes, you do need to report these suspicious matters already. So you are becoming almost a deputy of AUSTRAC through this process, but for right reason, right? I think, first of all, it's in everyone's best interest to stamp out money laundering, because money laundering is tied to organised crime, terrorism, and the like. So anything we can do to make not just Australia but the global economy safer, I think is a good thing. And being educated in this area, again, it's something that accountants, lawyers, real estate agents. We've seen lots of so real estate agents are captured under Tranche 2 as well. We've seen those examples where people have been scammed out of, houses sold out from underneath them because there's not enough due diligence undertaken in terms of understanding who the customer is. So I think there is a huge opportunity for betterment for the economy, Australian and global economies as a whole. In terms of where it could go in the future, look, I think there is a possibility it could get to the point where there is that obligation to look at every single transaction of your client base, but at the moment it is as is reasonably, reasonable to your operation to be able to capture that information. So the expectation isn't that you integrate 10,000 clients data set and troll over it to find any anomaly or irregularity. The responsibility is around the service lines that you're offering and the transactions that you have visibility of, and that's what we've really built SEER around. Funnily enough, the capability is there to actually integrate that, because I may have foreseen that could be a potential additional regulatory requirement down the track.
And again, obviously, it's not just accountants and lawyers. There's the gold bullion or precious metal dealers. I think we touched on as well. Real estate agents, potentially conveyancers. Is there going to be a tranche 3? Like, do you foresee that becoming, is it going to get to, and I don't know even if this is an option, but the retail space where you're having to not accept cash payments, or if you are, you're going to have to report the amount of cash that you've been receiving over the counter? Is that where this is all heading?
Yeah, well, look, I don't think that'll get to that stage, because look, again, we're seeing a lot more of those transactions are moving away from cash society. So cash is one of the key areas of risk, and if you look at the risk assessment in the system, you'll see that, because cash is one of those assets that can be laundered, it can be easily shifted, and the like. So I think what we're seeing is a move away from cash in society. Whether you like it or not, I actually am a strong proponent and supporter of cash. And obviously, you've got a lot of uncles that work in the trades, mate. So I'm sure.
How much for cash?
That's right. So look, I think it's there's a lot to come before us, and I don't think there's an appetite really to go into retail and the like. It's sitting where the legislation is really sitting and focused on where those real risk areas are around these transactions.
Yeah, let's hope not, because as you said earlier, for most of us, we're already working for a couple of government organisations, and it just feels that now we continue to work for them. Yes, there's an ultimate benefit to the country, but as an end client, it almost feels like they're getting audited every time they want to speak to us, which is great to build a better economy and to drive good business. But I think it's actually detracting from the value service offering without us having to substantially increase our fees, which is already challenging in the current economic environment, right? So let's hope that this is now something that'll stay in its current format for a period of time. It'll allow all businesses to get aboard, particularly the SMEs, right? Because being an SME ourselves, it just feels like there's this never-ending requirement to put on board more systems, more processes, more people, which is becoming really, really difficult to assign a value to and to make a client ultimately pay for.
Yeah. Well, you imagine if you wanted to start a new accounting firm today, you're a one-man band, you have to meet these compliance requirements. And the cost of doing that could be quite large.
Yeah.
And it's the burden of having to do it as well, especially if you all of a sudden get to 20 clients or 30 or 50 clients. That's 50 clients you've got to vet. And if you're by yourself, that's a cost that you have to sit up later at night and do it yourself.
Correct.
Or push it somewhere else. So where do you go and how do you do it?
It's a bit daunting, it's a bit frightening, but hopefully we through whether it be overseas product or alternate products in the market, we can onboard it, and clients are willing and able to answer the questions. Craig, if a business owner is listening today and they were to take one or two things away from today's conversation, what would it be?
Don't sit on your hands. You need the clock is ticking. So as I said earlier, the registrations for your business as a designated service provider kicks off on the 31st of March. And if you don't know whether you're a designated service provider or not, you need to find out pretty quickly. We do have a function on the website. So if you go to overseer-aml.au, there is a tool on the website that you put your URL in for your website, you can put some description in, and we'll give you some guidance as to whether or not you likely fall under. So it's not legal advice, it's just guidance. And it'll also add a few other things in there. It says, if you are providing this service, and this service, in addition to what you've said, then you will be captured. So it's a really good tool, great little guide. Have a look at that, and yeah, don't sit back and do nothing, because it'll be at your own peril, basically. Make sure you register on time, and make sure you realistically into March, you need to start looking at getting your risk assessment. So signing up to these platforms, hopefully Overseer AML, get your risk assessment sorted and get your program up and running, starting to get your police clearance certificates sorted, and then into your education and training for your staff. The other key thing is have a look at the AUSTRAC website. There's a lot of information on that as well. If you just educate yourself, I think is really important.
So there's two critical dates, as I understand it. 31 March, there's a requirement to enrol.
Yep.
And 1 July is go time.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. Okay. Well, Craig, I really appreciate you taking the time today. You've spoken really well. I think you've made clear to at least myself, I now have a better understanding, and hopefully the listeners do too. Craig, if anyone wants to reach out, to find you, to learn more, to have a chat, where can they find you?
Absolutely. Jump on the SEER website, on the SEER Integrity website, on the Overseer website, LinkedIn as well. Connect, and more than happy to have a conversation. More than happy to give a demo of what Overseer is. There's a video on the website that gives you a bit of an understanding, but more than happy to sit down and present to anyone who's willing to listen, basically.
Mate, we could listen to you all day, Craig. It's been a pleasure, mate. Thank you for your time, and look forward to seeing you in the lunchroom in a couple of hours.
No worries. Thanks, Paz.
Thanks, mate.
Appreciate it.